Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for the match preview. Newcastle head down to take on Arsenal in the capital on Saturday evening. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined as usual by John Gibson. We're coming to you on YouTube. Give this video a thumbs up, hit subscribe, and of course on our podcast channel as well. Leave us a rating and a review if you get the chance. I'm going to first start by saying, John, anyone that is expecting this episode to be full of optimism, positivity. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you guys that we're going to be full of joy, because I am dreading Saturday against Arsenal. I am absolutely dreading it. Dan Burn up against Saka has kept me awake the last few nights, but
It'll
more on
keep
that.
Dan awake the last few nights.
More on that in a moment. We're going to start with Dan Ashworth and his exit from Newcastle United. He's on gardening leave. He's going to eventually join Manchester United. We don't want to dwell on it too much because, to be truthful, John, I'm getting bored of it. I'm sick of the constant dialogue and the constant back and forth on it. Hopefully it gets resolved sooner rather than later. But I couldn't, go on with this episode without asking your view on it. Is it a big blow for Newcastle that Dan Ashworth is heading to the Northwest?
It's a blow, unquestionably, but it's not terminal. I don't see it as that's the end of Newcastle. Brighton have hardly missed a heartbeat since he left, and the same thing will happen with us. And our two greatest signings, in my opinion, Trippier and Bruno, both came before he took up the job on our behalf. And we've also must always remember, he doesn't, all these great signings we've talked about, he doesn't select the signings. He gets the deals done once the selection has been made. So we haven't lost the ability to unearth gems. We've just lost the ability to get the best possible deal. But quite frankly, if he feels the way he goes, the way he obviously does, then get out of town, and sooner the better. And I've got to say, I'm delighted that Newcastle have acted so decisively and so quickly once Dan Ashworth admitted the situation on Sunday. I found it infuriating seeing him sitting there in a seat of power at the game on Saturday when we all knew what the outcome was going to be. But until it formally took place, I guess nothing could be done about it from Newcastle United's point of view.
And there seems to be a real sense of entitlement from certain sections of the Manchester United fan base who believe that Newcastle United are being unfair in A, demanding such a big fee for Dan Ashworth, and B, having this long process, drawn out garden leave where he can't work for Manchester United. And it turns out Newcastle will actually have to pay him through that period, and Manchester United fans can't get their head around that either. But Newcastle are well within their right to hold on to Dan Ashworth to stop him moving to a direct rival. And, those Manchester United fans who are complaining, who are saying, let him go, let him start now, let him come on the cheap, utterly bizarre, and just a real lack of understanding of how things work.
Well, I mean, the whole thing has left a bad taste. First and foremost, that Newcastle United hear on Sunday from Dan Ashworth himself that he wants to leave, and that an approach has been made. So an approach was made, which in players' terms would be illegal. It would be a tapping up process. We all know it happens with players. We're not naive. We know it happens throughout football. But nonetheless, to hear from Dan Ashworth that Man U been in touch before Man U walked through the front door was bound to inflame passions within St James's Park. And, quite frankly, what favours have Man U done us? Look at the deal they wanted for Jesse Lingard to come here on loan when they wanted us to pay a fortune to have him for a paltry 6 months and knock that deal on the head. And all of a sudden we should be playing ball when it's up to us what the deal is. No, thank you. We're not going to. And I'm all for Newcastle digging their heels in here. Let him go and have the best garden outside of the Chelsea Flower Show. It doesn't matter to me, and it doesn't matter. Newcastle are... It's not just been stubbornness. They've got to pay the huge wage during the whole of the gardening leave, so they're having to bite the bullet. It is costing them, but as a matter of pride, why should they make it easy for Manchester United and for Dan Ashworth, who, is obviously a man of great loyalty when you look at the jobs he's had in football and how long he's lasted in each one of them.
Nice bit of sarcasm there from you, John. But yes, and I guess the cost it will take to keep Dan Ashworth from Manchester United until say 2026, there will be a greater cost, especially in the short term at Newcastle United, if indeed they just allowed him to start his new role, because he knows the players and the positions they're going to target in the summer, and where Newcastle United are, where Manchester United are, there's not too much difference, okay, in terms of spending power, potentially, yes, and in terms of maybe being able to attract the bigger name, maybe, but they'll probably be in the same kind of area in terms of players and positions. So Newcastle quite rightly want to at least keep the summer transfer plans a little bit secret, and especially from the eyes and knowledge of a direct rival, which is the other point, John. Actually, I'm going to finish on a positive, because it is quite nice to see the national press and media referring to Manchester United as direct rivals of Newcastle United. And that in itself shows you just how far Newcastle have come in a short space of time.
Sure, there's no question. It's a matter of damage limitation from Newcastle United's point of view, and it's a matter of dignity and pride that you don't make it easy for for the guy walking out. I mean, let us not be naive, and I don't think any of us are. I mean, Dan Ashworth knows that his future now is Manchester United, not Newcastle. That's a bridge well burnt. And now, while I'm not suggesting for one moment, because legally I would be at risk, that Dan Ashworth's going to spill all the secrets to Manchester United about what Newcastle are going to do, but there's nothing we can do about that. He knows the secrets, and just because he's on gardening leave, he's got to come in the house to have a cup of tea after doing his loan. And who's to say he doesn't make a phone call then? I mean,
Whoa. I'm going to have to jump in
no,
there. He can't, we're going to legally, he
I'm
couldn't
not.
do that.
No, we. It may be so, but we have also got to face facts that that situation is available and can happen in the way that Newcastle could find out what was happening from somebody coming into the job. It's life. It's a possibility.
It's a
If you
possibility, but we have to say Dan Ashworth played it by the book when he left Brighton to come to Newcastle. He wasn't picking up the phone. He he
was he
stuck
not?
to the rules. No, he stuck to the rules. He was
Did he?
he was very good in that sense, and
Oh,
I've got full belief that whatever garden leave he serves, he'll stick by it, because it's essentially like signing an NDA, isn't it? Okay, you can't probably prove that someone's leaked something, but you are betting on their better nature. And by all accounts, Dan Ashworth seems to be someone who will stick by the rules, stick by the law. And I'd like to think he will do as well. I get what you're saying, John, but from the people you talk to and his past behaviour, he seems to be a person who will stick to the rules and hopefully won't leak anything from Newcastle's book of secrets. We're going to move on to the game against Arsenal. It comes on the back of John, another draw at St James's Park against Bournemouth. Probably the worst first half I've seen, especially this season, but it's up there with one of the worst first halves ever, I think, in my view. Then to go behind, to get back in it, the performance wasn't there from Newcastle United. They've got all their injuries, but to draw against Bournemouth at home, not a good look, is it?
no, not at all. I mean, forget temporarily that we've got injuries, and we most certainly have. But the side that you're able to put out on the field to start with ought to be able to take care of teams like Bournemouth and Luton at home. And in both cases, Newcastle late on have had to come from behind to salvage just a point, not to win the game. They were 4-2 down against Luton and 2-1 down against Bournemouth in injury time, and had to come from behind just to get a point against two teams that are in the bottom eight, as indeed we're forced to one up here, and we managed to beat them down there. It is not a good sign of a club that played Champions League football this season and has aspirations to qualify for Europe again this season. If you're going to do that, you take care of Bournemouth and Luton at home, and we didn't. So the alarm bells have got to ring there, and the excuse has got to be parked to one side about the injuries, because while that is true, the players you're left with should, in theory, be able to manage a bottom eight club. They shouldn't be able to manage perhaps a top four club, but they should be able to manage a bottom eight club, and they haven't been able to do that. And what is frightening is the defence, because we have, in our last four home games, let in 2, 4, 3, and 3. That's 12 goals in 4 games. And 3 of those games were against very average opposition in Bournemouth, Luton, and Forest. We accept Man City, but not those 3. And we have been as bad as that. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that it's just down to the back four. It's the keepers involved and the midfielders are involved, and the wingers tracking back are involved. It's a whole parcel of things. But the back four is awful, and it is getting exposed, and it is getting more so by the game. And I know Eddie has this great feeling, and I understand it totally, that he doesn't like tinkering with a back four even when he can, because he likes understanding amongst his back four, etc., etc. And so he tries to stick with the same final line. But we can't at the moment. There's a chronic lack of pace in it. We haven't got anybody that we can put in with real pace, so we're not going to solve that problem. But for example, and I don't want to dwell on the thing because it seems like you're always having to go at one man. But for example, the problem with Dan Burn as a left back, which was there to see again against Bournemouth when their decisive second goal, he stood off because he was afraid of getting done on pace. That, for me, is beginning to affect Botman. Botman is not looking anything like the player we knew at Newcastle, and hasn't since he come back from injury, whether he's been pushed back too quickly from injury and hasn't been able to pick everything up in the quickness of the game, whether he's worried about the man that's playing outside him, who's getting exposed game after game. But between the pair of them, we are getting targeted down our left-hand side now by ruthless clubs that know what they're doing. And by the way, as we're on that subject, on Saturday, Saka. Do you not think that Arteta will be saying, get the ball to Saka and get him isolated against Burn? We cannot afford to let that happen. And the way we can stop that happening is by not picking the big man to start. We've kept bringing Livramento on, but we've always brought him on when the damage has been done. Start with him.
I don't think he will do. I think he'll stick with Dan Burn. I think the only reason he might switch it is if he goes to a back five or Fabian Schär isn't available to play. But even then, I think Jamal Lascelles would probably come in for Fabian Schär and Dan Burn remains out on the left. I'm like you. I'd be starting Tino Livramento. We've said it for the past few weeks, but I think the fact he's stuck with Dan Burn, despite game after game, Dan Burn being targeted, and some games he's got away with it because the attack hasn't come off.
When did he last get away with it? He didn't get away with it against Bournemouth when they scored their second. He didn't get away with it at Forest, but luckily the manager acted very, very quickly, put Livramento to left back and put Burn in an hour 3. And he didn't get away with it against Luton. And against Luton and against Bournemouth, he was hooked after mistakes had ended up in goals. So, what loyalty, I can thoroughly understand where you're coming from, Andrew, and I think you could well be right that Eddie will do, but I'm not talking about, for once, I'm not talking about what Eddie will do. I'm talking about what Eddie should do. Loyalty is getting to the stage of stubbornness. And by the way, it is costing us. And can you think of a worse guy to go up against Big Dan on Saturday than Saka?
No, a man with 15 goals this season, 12 assists.
And he's a winger.
Yeah, he frightens me. Like I said at the start of the show, it's that battle that's coming up that's really keeping me awake. I mean, we're talking about Newcastle conceding goals. Arsenal have scored 21 goals in 5 straight wins in the Premier League. Palace 5-0, Forest 2-1, Liverpool 3-1, West Ham 6-0, and Burnley 5-0.
Those last two were away. Andrew.
Yeah. And
I mean,
they've hit their form. The goals are coming from all over the shop. They're not just coming from one man. They're coming from several different outlets. They are the informed team at the moment, you would argue, and I am dreading Saturday. I would like to sit here and create a bit of positivity and say I think they can sneak a win, they can sneak a draw. But I'll be honest, the way their defense is at the moment, it'd be interesting to see if Martin Dubravka's confidence is taken hit after the mistake against Bournemouth. It shouldn't do because actually he played very well. I thought he kept Newcastle in the game with 3 or 4 great saves. So hopefully his mind's in the right place. But just as a cohesive unit, it's not working. Like you say, John, a lack of pace. They're getting caught out time and time again. You throw in an injury to Fabian Schär potentially, that disrupts it even further. Then Arsenal's form in front of goal. I might not even watch the game, to be fair. I'm that scared of it. I'm that scared of it. Give me some positivity. Can you find anything?
only yes, and it's futile because I can feel the way you feel. But the only positivity I can give you, Andrew, is that we've played Manchester United. We've beaten Manchester United twice this season. We've beaten Aston Villa twice this season. We've beaten Arsenal 1-0. We've beaten Manchester City in the League Cup. We've beaten Paris Saint-Germain in the Champions League. When we play good sides, we've got the ability to lift ourselves. When we play bad sides, we get beat by Bournemouth, we get beat by Luton, we get beat by Forest, we get beat by Everton. It's ludicrous that it's the wrong way around, but we actually do better against the good sides than we do against the bad sides. So if that's the case, you can understand what happened with Bournemouth and Luton, and you can hope about Arsenal. There you are. That's the only bit of good news I can give you.
Yeah, I'll take it. I'll take it. I mean, the other boost potentially is that Joe Willock and Alexander Isak could be involved in some aspect on Saturday, which is much needed because, as people are well aware, in the Monday show, I referenced the point that I actually felt Newcastle were at their most creative against Bournemouth that they've been in weeks. We've been complaining many games that Wilson and Isak were not getting the service, and I did think it was there on Saturday. The ironic thing was that they just didn't have an instinctive striker to put the ball in the back of the net with some wonderful chances that were created. If Isak, John, is, as we believe, he's been training, would you start him or would you not risk it? Because we always seem to come back to this scenario where a player's back and Newcastle really need him to be available to start, but you put him in the starting 11 and Isak's in a prime example, actually. He then breaks down 2 or 3, 4 games later because maybe they've come back one or 2 games too quickly. There's no option to change it, so he ends up playing 90 minutes. For me, Newcastle need him, but I'm not sure I would start him. I just think the risk long term is not worth the reward that you could potentially get on Saturday against an Arsenal side who actually know how to defend as well. Because what they conceded 2 goals in the last 5 games, so.
I mean, from my point of view, Andrew, and this might surprise you because I go the other way sometimes, I wouldn't involve him at all. I would keep him and start him at Blackburn because Blackburn is more winnable than Arsenal. I mean, if Isak starts and plays for 90 minutes and doesn't aggravate anything, we can still lose because Arsenal is that sort of game. Isak's not going to turn a hammering, a potential hammering, into 3 points on his own by his selection. But he can turn the Blackburn game and put us in the quarterfinals. And if this season is going to be saved in any way, shape, or form, it's probably not going to be through Europe. It's going to be through winning the FA Cup, getting to Wembley and winning the FA Cup. So I wouldn't involve him if he is not 100% on blob. And how can he be? He hasn't had any short cameo appearances as a sub. I would leave him out at Arsenal because I don't think it would make that significant a difference. It could at Blackburn. I would keep him out and start him at Blackburn.
I can see that logic 100%. I think I would put both Willock and Isak on the bench and then look to introduce them with 20 minutes. So if Newcastle was still within a chance of getting something out of the game, I'm not sure I would
Yeah,
put them on the pitch just to get their minutes out of Newcastle or 2 or
no,
3 down because I'm not sure that'll do them mentally any good either. And starting Isak's a difficult one as well, because you imagine Newcastle are not going to have much of the ball. They're probably going to be camped in a little bit, and it's going to be about off the ball movement, and that'll probably frustrate him. So I'm not really sure needing him to run more than he's going to have the ball is the right way to reintroduce him, into the starting 11.
The way we are going to play, Andrew, is the way we'll be forced to play, which is we will be getting uh, two lines of four at the back. They'll be coming at us, and we'll have to break with pace using Gordon, Almiron if he starts, their pace to get us up the pitch from a defensive situation. It is not going to be the normal type of game.
Well, you talk about the pace they've got, and they have got pace, even if it is Isak and Willock on the bench. They've got Gordon, they've got Barnes, Almiron can get on his bike as well. But how would you see the forward three working? Because on Saturday, like I mentioned, I felt the service was there, but the instinctive nature to put the ball in the back of the net wasn't. Now, we're saying Isak is either going to be on the bench or he's not going to start. So that's one solution totally gone. He's just going to have to stick with it. But would you like to see maybe one of them told stay there? Because what we saw against Bournemouth was we saw a bit of a rotation. You saw Barnes, Murphy, and
Plays an
Gordon.
orthodox centre forward. We played three centre forwards against Bournemouth. We started off with Gordon, we played Harvey Barnes, and then we played Murphy. We played three centre forwards. And by the way, none of them are centre forwards, and none of them had a punch at all. And they're good players. I'm not having a go at them. They're good players, but they're good wingers. They're not good centre forwards. But we've got to have somebody that stays in the centre of the pitch. I mean, Arsenal are playing with Jesus injured. They're playing without a centre forward as well. But they're playing it with interflowing movement. They've got clever players. You know what it reminds me a bit of, Andrew? It reminds me a bit of, because nothing's new in football, back in the day when Newcastle United played without the centre forward voluntarily the whole time when they had Keegan, Waddle and Beardsley. And they just intermixed and interchanged and pulled defenders around, and they were clever. Arsenal are clever. And you know the secret? The players have got to be as good individually as the Arsenal ones are, and as Waddle, Beardsley and Keegan were. They're three. Look at their England caps. Tot up the England caps between Waddle, Beardsley and Keegan. That tells you how good they are. They could interlock, they could change, they could make things happen. Our three, when we haven't got Wilson or we haven't got Isak, haven't got the quality of that. And so they don't do it as well. And we don't do it as well as Arsenal. But we somehow find a way to score goals. But sometimes, the two goals we got against Bournemouth were scruffy. They weren't well-worked goals. One was a penalty. Nobody was sure whether it was a penalty or not. And the other was dear old Matt Ritchie from 3 3/4 inches.
Yeah, and I mean, I could pop that in the back of the net, but I do think it's fine margins, because if Gordon had decided to chip Neto on Saturday, Newcastle probably win that game. If Murphy sticks his head or hits the ball first time, that wonderful lofted ball over the top from Bruno, there's another goal that goes in the back of the net. You had 2 or 3, 4 crosses across the face of the box where you just needed someone to gamble. What was lacking wasn't the chances, it was someone putting the ball in the back of the net. And if Newcastle are going to win on Saturday, it's as simple as that. They need to take their chances. And for me,
because they'll get about 2 in an hour and a half, so they've got to take them.
And I guess the approach will be slightly different to what you found against Bournemouth, where they were able to have a bit of time on the ball and they were creating chances. And maybe it plays better into Newcastle's hands in a sense, where hitting Arsenal on the counter suits the likes of Gordon, Barnes, Almiron better. And maybe you don't actually have to have that rigid centre forward to make it work. And you can just press from all over the shop.
That's true, mate. But if you're going to score goals, you need that rigid centre forward that makes it work, because he sticks the ball in the net, because that is his everyday job and he knows how to do it. It is not, if you look at the 3 we play up front, like against Bournemouth, and the subs when they come on, The first job of all those lads under normal circumstances is not to score goals. It's to
Mm.
create goals, it's to open defences up, it's to get space down the wing, it's to get the ball in the channel. Scoring comes about third on the list of each one of those players. Whereas with an orthodox centre forward with his Shiva or his Supermac or a Les Ferdinand, or can we say it, Wilson before his injury things, and Isaac who can play, they can finish. They know how to finish and they want to finish. We haven't got a player like that at the moment. And by the way, it's only our own fault because we've played with two centre forwards that are injury prone for a couple of seasons now. I mean, we can't complain. I mean, Newcastle United fans can't complain because they can say water have bought. But Newcastle are just suffering what you sow, you shall reap.
Yeah, and we both said in the summer, a third striker was necessary, and we don't like to sit here and say we were right because we'd
No,
rather have been proved wrong. But hey,
absolutely.
so let's go back to the defense, because I was asked how on Monday. I was asked by a pal who's an Arsenal fan, how do you see Newcastle approaching the game, and I said, a bit like you, John, what I would do is very different to what Eddie Howe will do. I wouldn't be against seeing five at the back. I don't think he'll do it, but I wouldn't be against it because I think you can put Dan Burn in as one of those defenders, and he looks so much more comfortable. Tino Livramento out on the left to try and stop Saka. And actually, the Arsenal fan I was speaking to said when Livramento came on the last time against Arsenal, the time before, it must have been the last time actually, he had Saka, he stopped him, and he was fearing Livramento up against Saka, which tells you all you need to know potentially about what Arsenal don't want to happen. But would you go five at the back?
I can see a reason for doing that, and I wouldn't be totally against it. The first thing I've got to say is I think Byrne has a greater right to play the left-sided centre half than left back. And as if he was to stay in the team, he should be in the team and play either in place of Botman or in a three. And I'm not suggesting he should replace Botman. What I mean is he's got more credentials to play in that situation than he has to play wide against Saka. I mean, Saka will have when they get back from the Champions League match, Saka will have the prayer mat out wanting to say leave Burn in the side. What a good player Burn is, etc., etc. Livramento would give Saka a game. It'll be tough, whoever plays. And of course, there's the other tactical side of it, which is fascinating. We'll play three centre halves or we'll play two centre halves. There has been suggestions we just need a single centre half because, and we could put a shield in front of that centre half because they don't play with an orthodox through the middle centre forward. With Zizou out, they play Tossard in there, who is the equivalent of Gordon. I mean, a wide player that is now playing in the centre. He's got the feet to be able to do it, and they get the pour through from midfield, the wide play. If we think we are well off, and a lot of our success has been built on our wide players, Gordon and Almiron when he was on his pump earlier in the season, etc., being quick and work. What have they got with Saka and Martinelli? They've got the ultimate quick, wonderful attacking wingers.
You certainly have, and it's going to take something to stop them. I mean, if it was five at the back, I mean, obviously you'd want Fabian Schär in, Burn, Botman, but if Schär's out injured, it looked a pretty nasty injury that he was carrying at the end of the game against Bournemouth. Then Lascelles comes in, doesn't really help with it with the pace, but that is what it is. It would then be a question of who drops out to bring in that third centre back, and it would be one of Bruno, Miley, or Longstaff. And for me, it would be no question. It would be Longstaff that drops out because I thought Miley on Saturday against Bournemouth was absolutely excellent. He was disrupting play, won nearly every challenge possible. And to be slotted into that defensive role is a tough task, but he seems to be handling it quite well. So if they did go five at the back, for me, it would be Bruno and Miley sitting just in front.
Yeah, I think that's fair comment. It's obviously not going to be Bruno, and Miley's performance against Bournemouth certainly doesn't warrant being dropped. Far from it, he was star man. But I believe, and it was Supermac mentioning it, I can't remember. I remember earlier in the season, Livramento being a top performance, and he was dropped the next game. I'm not certain if he played right back or left back. It would probably be left back. I don't know how many
I
times.
think it was right back against Man City in the cup.
And Trippier played left back. And he had a top performance anyway, and was left out the next game. But yes, you would think if you're going to go 5 at the back, the man that would go out, because Sean hasn't looked himself for a while either, has he?
No.
In fairness, Sean Longstaff's dipped.
And I mean, in all fairness, it's a bit of a relevant conversation because we go back to the old saying that it's not about what we would do, it's about what Eddie Howe will do, and he will play, in my opinion, the same formation that he's comfortable with, and that's the 4 at the back, 3 across the middle, the 2 wingers, and then the 1 man up top. And to be quite honest, other than Fabian Schär, if he is indeed injured, I can't see him changing the lineup at all. I think it'll be the same starting 11 that's played, that played against Bournemouth.
Yeah, well, that's something to look forward to. You're right, and if he has to change the back for sure, that'll make him doubly not want to change Byrne for Livramento, because you wouldn't want to change 2 of the back 4 when he doesn't like changing the back 4.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, again, the ironic thing is actually you could move Dan Byrne into the middle to pair Botman, and you would probably look a lot more comfortable. And he did against Villa when he went 5 at the back. He does look more comfortable in that centre back role.
That's because he is a centre back.
Yeah, and with not an out and out number 9 to face up against, you probably have an easier. Well, he definitely will have an easier time of it because he's not going up against Saka. But if Schär's missing, John, I think you can bet your bottom dollar it'll be Jamal Lascelles coming in.
Oh, it will. He won't want to play 2 left footers in a 4 in Botman and Byrne. He won't want to play 2 left footers in a 4. I mean, when you've got Shaw, he can play right side. When Shaw's fit, he can play right side, or when Lascelles has come in, he can play left side Shaw, which is what he did when Botman was out. It was Lascelles and Shaw. No, if Shaw doesn't play, it will be Lascelles before it'll be Botman and Byrne.
And
again, Byrne would be forgetting what the composition of the 4 would be. Byrne would do better at centre half than at left back at the Emirates.
And again, I apologise to our listeners and viewers because this is a very down in the dumps podcast. Like I say, I'm just not feeling comfortable or optimistic about it at all. And there's a stat doing the rounds, John, which makes me feel even more pessimistic about Saturday. I haven't checked it, admittedly. I'm just going to take it at face value. But Newcastle United haven't scored a goal at the Emirates since 2014.
For Yonks, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you know what, though? Records in history, they're to be broken. History's there to be rewritten. They're going to get 2 or 3 on Saturday, right?
No, they're not. But I tell you what, if you want something optimistic on this podcast, we are going to go to Blackburn and win.
I'll take that. I mean, I was
Blackburn and win.
I was speaking to a Forest podcaster ahead of the Forest game a few weeks back, and he was talking about how against Arsenal they lost 2-1, but it was the aggressive nature of their performance which really kind of rattled Arsenal. And we know Newcastle have got that about them. Obviously, it'd be a lot easier if Joe Linton was available because he's the tank. But we know that Gordon likes a tussle. We know Bruno can get stuck in. Obviously, the yellow card kind of restricts him to the degree that he can get stuck in. But we know they can't handle the physical battle. Can Newcastle bring that physicality to the Emirates on Saturday?
They've got to. It's their only hope. They've got to go out and get in Arsenal's faces, make it tough for them, make it niggly for it, slow it down, sit on your backside when you get a free kick, take your time over the situation, disrupt them, annoy the crowd, annoy their team. You've got to play it that way. You've got to have a physicality. If you don't have a physicality, the Red Sea will absolutely engulf you. and you'll be drowned in the first quarter of an hour. You've got to have that to be able to survive. And yes, it can be done. And yes, on the law of averages, the other bit of optimism, apart from what I give you, Andrew, which is we're better against the good teams than we are against the poor sides, the other bit of optimism, and what I'm catching all the straws that are flying past in the wind, is that on the law of averages, Arsenal can't keep playing every game and scoring 5 and 6 and murdering sides and doing this and doing that and showboating and killing sides without an orthodox centre forward and Saka and Martinelli flying down the way. They can't, there's got to be a hiccup. And when a hiccup comes, it's unexpected. That's why it's a hiccup. And they refer back to doing what they do automatically the next game. Maybe, just maybe, this will be the hiccup. You don't know what might happen. Newcastle might get a fluke goal in the first 10 minutes. Some Arsenal player might get a red card. An Arsenal guy might score an OG. We might suddenly come out and do what we did when we went to Aston Villa. Look at when we went to Aston Villa, how well we did then. That result was as surprising. Aston Villa were flying. Aston Villa hadn't lost at home since Adrian's Wall was built. And yet we took them, and deservedly so, in that game. That might happen again. Pig might fly past my window as well, of course, but it could happen again. Nothing in this world is impossible.
Yeah, and look, Newcastle seems to be one of those clubs that gets in the skin of Mikel Arteta as well. We've seen him properly wound up against Newcastle, so maybe
the 1-0 up here, he nearly done his nuts in, didn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he was really, really belly aching about the goal, about everything, and he will be using that to wind them up before the game, of course. Remember what they did to you unjustifiably at St James's Park. I don't agree, by the way. I think he was a crybaby. But there you go. They will be using that and going out and saying, give them what they deserve this time. But we've got to use that and say, listen, they come up here with all their big names and didn't get a result. Let's do it again to them.
Yeah, exactly. Newcastle United could rise and surprise pretty much everyone, including myself, and get a result. But again, it's probably a nod, John, to how far they've come. That this is the first time in a wee while where I'm really not looking forward to the game. We faced some big sides this season, and I've gone, do you know what? Newcastle can give these guys a right go and can pick up a result here. This I can't see for the life of me where at all they get a goal, let alone a point, let alone 3. You take the optimism from that point, and it is a kind of a nod to how far they've come, because it's very rare we say that.
Yeah. I think that's absolutely true. This season has been a tapering from what we had last season. If the funny thing is that what we were expecting, we as fans, but when the takeover happened, was we're expecting last season to be like this season, and this season to be like last season. In other words, if last season we'd been around 7 and 8 and it got to the quarterfinal of the League Cup and to the 6th round of the FA Cup, which we'll do if we beat Blackburn, if we'd had that last season, we'd have said that's good. And then finished 4th this season and got to a Wembley Cup final and would have said, "Bye, that's progress. This is all fan dabble-dozy." But it's happened the other way around. And so there's that feeling of slight disappointment this season. We accept that we've come an awful long way since the takeover, since Eddie Howe comes, since we signed Trippier and Bruno, since Trippier and that was playing against Cambridge up here in the FA Cup and getting beaten at home with Eddie Howe manager and Trippier as a new signing. Haven't we come a long way since then? But we can't live on saying, oh, it's all down to injuries and haven't we become a long way? Because that begins to wear a bit thin. It's a shame. If these seasons had been flipped, the whole place would be bubbling. If this had been last season and we were now on our way to a League Cup final and 4th in the league, would say, bye, this is absolutely terrific. That is why Tuesday night is so important. That can take a slightly disappointing season and make it into something wow. Not if we get beaten a 6th round. But to get the sixth round keeps the hope alive that we can do something in the FA Cup. And if we do, that would change everything.
And it's understandable why you're kind of maybe focusing on Tuesday, but it's important, isn't it, for Eddie Howe when the players that their main focus is Saturday and they don't let Tuesday become a distraction.
Oh, yes, of course. And I don't think it does become a distraction because, hey, you can't get distracted when you're playing Arsenal for an hour and a half. I think that concentrates minds straight away. I don't think Byrne or Botman on their current form will be concerned about Blackburn. I think they'll be thinking about Saka and Martinelli and Ostergaard and Trossard and everybody else. Arsenal will concentrate the minds. Nobody will let their mind drift to Blackburn. They'll be absolutely terrified that if we don't get this right, we can be in trouble. If we get it right, we can, well, maybe produce a shock. But if we get it wrong, we could be humiliated, and we do not intend to get it wrong. That's the way they've got to think.
Well, as you always say, John, you've always got a chance in a two-horse race. Before I get your score prediction, just a
Oh
quick
dear.
word on the fact it's another 8 p.m. kickoff on a Saturday, which means there's no hope of fans getting public transport back. They're going to have to stop over in the capital. They weren't given too much notice about the change as well. It's not on, is it, at all? We've seen it as well coming up next month with the Chelsea game. It's an absolute disgrace. It's not just a Newcastle United thing. It's across the board.
Yeah.
You know, fair play to those going down. The commitment's never in doubt. But I feel so sorry for those who are doing it because, you know, massive expense, massive inconvenience. The Premier League, the TV companies, they need to change their ways. They need to start putting fans first, don't they?
Yeah, and the only way the Premier League can do it is by telling the television companies that they can't decide we're going to play 12 midnight on the moon on a Sunday, and that's the way it is. They've got to be given more restriction. Of course, less money comes in from the television clubs in, so the Premier League don't want to do it. So what happens is that a game that was devised as a spectator sport and has become the greatest spectator sport in the world is no longer about spectators. It is the last people that are considered are the fans. It is now just about how much money can we squeeze out of this lemon, and they do that. This game is the great game it is, not only because kids dream of playing it, but because adults of my age are still in love and want to go to every game they can possibly go to because it is such a huge part of their life. They aren't even considered now. It doesn't matter. And it's not just to Newcastle United, it's to every fan in the country that cares enough to travel the length and breadth of this country to support their team. They're asking Newcastle United, with the potential of being hammered, by the way, I said, I didn't say it would happen, but the potential of it, to travel all the way down to Arsenal at that time of night on a Saturday, have to book into some hotel or sleep on a park bench or something before they come home on a Sunday, and then get up and go to Blackburn for the cup. I mean, you know, there is no consideration, but yet that's the way it is, and nobody's going to change it. You know why? Because pounds matter more than punters. Pounds
And yet,
instead of punters.
Newcastle United fans continue to sell out every away allocation. Fantastic support and safe travel to anyone heading down there to Blackburn
Absolutely.
on Tuesday. Come on then, John. How is Saturday going to go?
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I said a couple of years back when we first started doing these things, Andrew, that let's be
A couple of
realistic.
years back, John. It seems like a lifetime ago.
Well, it probably is a lifetime ago, but I don't like talking about that at the moment at my age. But there we are. But yeah, I mean, we used to say, let's just say win, lose or draw, because if you try to do a score, it's like confetti in the wind, isn't it? The score can be absolutely anything. And quite frankly, the score can be absolutely anything this weekend in particular. I think, sadly, but I think we'll lose. And so do you, and so do an awful lot of Newcastle United fans. It's just, I would like to think, and I can see it happening, that we'll lose with dignity and we'll lose by a goal, 2-1, 1-0. It might be 3-1, but let it not be more than that.
Can you lose by a big amount and still show dignity? Because I've no doubt that the players will put their all in, they'll be committed, they'll put their effort in, they'll try, and Eddie Howe will try and win this game. But I can also see Arsenal scoring 4 or 5, I'm being brutally honest. Maybe I've just woken up on the wrong side of bed this morning. I don't know.
No. I mean, hey, listen, if Luton can score 4 against Newcastle at Newcastle, if Nottingham Forest can score 3 against Newcastle at Newcastle, then Arsenal, who are twice the side they are, can run up a cricket score in theory. Yes, it is not a game like you that I'm looking forward to at all. What I would like to see happen, if we're going to be faced by the defeat I think we are going to be faced by, is that it's something like 2-1, and then we go down to Blackburn very quickly afterwards and win, because that's a winnable game. That's got to be won on the night. There's no replay. And it can keep our dream alive while some more players may come back, etc., etc. So I'm taking the defeat. I'm hoping it's going to be 3-1 maximum, 2-1 if it happens, and it's not inevitable, but I expect it. But I also expect us to win at Blackburn. Now, how? Whether it's penalties, almost doesn't matter at Blackburn, but I'm expecting us to win. And that, I think the greater danger and the greater disappointment would come at Blackburn. If we get beat at Blackburn, that's a bigger disappointment, Andrew, than if we get beat at Arsenal.
Well, I agree. I agree. And sadly, I agree with your prediction for Saturday as well. Newcastle, they're just going to get beat. I'm sorry. That's the only result I can see happening. Hopefully, we're both proved wrong, John. And hopefully, Newcastle United can rise to the occasion and surprise at least us two. And that might be a few more.
Here's a bit of fun, Andrew. Just before you go, I would like to say,
Go on.
Because you do it to me often, I would like to do it to you. I'll give you a choice. You can win at Arsenal or you can win at Blackburn, but you can't win at both. Which do you take?
Oh, I don't like doing that because I don't like writing off a game. But yeah,
well, we've written off Arsenal already. But which would you take?
But they're still going to try. No, it's Blackburn, isn't it? Of course,
Yeah,
it's Blackburn.
absolutely
progression in the
cup. And I'm actually asking that to give us hope, because if we lose at Arsenal, it's not all doom and gloom, because we can win at Blackburn.
Yeah. But fingers crossed to go into the game against Blackburn on the back of a surprising but wonderful victory against Arsenal. This has been the Everything's Black and White podcast, the match preview with me, Andrew Musgrove, and John Gibson. Please hit like, subscribe, follow, leave us a rating and review from wherever you're getting your podcasts from. Head over to chroniclelive.co.uk for all the latest Newcastle United news. And for myself and John, we'll see you guys very soon.